want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me this afternoon. I'm really interested to take the time to get to know more about you and kind of how you got to the position that you're in today. So you're currently the Chief Executive Officer at Duffy Health Center, right?
That's right. That's my title.
And so how long have you worked there?
So I've been the CEO here for 10 years. So my
Okay.
husband and I moved to the Cape in 2010. We
Okay.
moved here from Chicago, and I had actually been the executive director of the healthcare for the homeless agency in Chicago
Oh,
for
okay.
almost 20 years before we
Wow.
moved here. So I
Wow.
knew the woman who had this job at Duffy before we moved here, and she told me she was going to retire, and we had a love for the Cape, so it worked out really well for us to interview and then get accepted to come here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
hmm
Now, do you mind just giving a brief overview of your current responsibilities that your role entails right now?
Sure, sure. So I am the CEO,
Mhm.
Chief Executive Officer, which means that I have overall responsibility really for everything that happens at Duffy Health Center. So our programmatic initiatives, our quality of care, operations, how the agency works and provides services every day. Um, I tend to be my responsibility focuses a lot on working with the board of directors who, as you know, are volunteers who help to lead the organization through their volunteerism.
Gotcha.
And then I have a leadership team of 5 people that report to me who are the directors of the organization, and they each run a different program area.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, I know your field is in health administration, so in previous roles, were you ever involved in patient care?
It's funny because people sometimes ask me if I'm a nurse
Yeah.
because that's not uncommon for women in particular who
Yeah.
are healthcare executives. They ask if you were a nurse, and no, I actually it's kind of funny. When I was in college, I thought about being a nurse,
Hmm.
but I had a really good friend from high school who went to nursing school, and I would, talk with her about what she was doing, and I thought, no, I don't want to do that.
Not for me.
Talk about, oh, we learned how to give people shots today, and I was like, I can't imagine sticking somebody in the arm.
Me either. Me either.
So I decided that I wanted to, actually, my goal when I went to college was to be a PE teacher because my
Oh,
PE teachers were always my favorite teachers.
yeah.
But then when I went to college, I ended up taking classes in health education, and
Hmm.
that's where I decided that I wanted to make my career. So I did have a job in health education for a few years, and then met through that job, I met doctors and nurses who worked in hospitals, and I decided that I wanted to not, I didn't want to be one, but I wanted
Hmm.
to work with them.
Gotcha.
So I explored health administration programs,
Hmm.
and that's where I went. I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan to
Cool.
learn how to be a hospital administrator. And I did that for a few years before I went out into the community to be a clinic administrator.
Cool. Cool. So now also with healthcare being a priority sector across the region, um, what is the significant impacts and or challenges you have seen due to COVID?
Well, there are very many.
Yeah, I
It's
bet.
been a very challenging year,
Yeah.
and it's while we're taping this, it's December of 2020,
Right.
and so we are in the midst of what they're calling the second surge, or it could be the third surge. There was a little surge in some places across the country over the summer.
Yeah.
But our case rates have been very low here on the Cape and here in Massachusetts since March, April,
Hmm.
but now they're starting to go up again. So I think, when the pandemic first became a reality here, we really had to think about, first of all, about the safety of our staff and how we were providing services in the building. So we quickly moved to doing all of our visits on the telephone. So instead of having patients come in and meet with their therapist or their nurse practitioner face to face, we were calling them and talking with them over the phone. And that turned out to be very, very successful.
Oh, good.
We were worried that our volume would go down, which would mean that our revenue would go down and that, you know, we might be in a really bad financial position. But that turned out not to be the case, that we were able to take care of all of our patients' needs. Now, it's not good care, you know, to do care by the telephone all the time. So starting in July, we started working on a plan to reopen the building and bring more patients back into the building. And so the challenges that that brings is to make sure that our staff are safe, that they feel safe, that we're listening to their concerns. Early on in the pandemic, we provided additional vacation time for people who had to take care of childcare issues and other issues. We provided additional COVID sick time in case our employees got COVID or were suspected of having COVID and had to socially isolate at home. So we did a lot of things. We provided crisis pay. So we did a lot of things to support our staff through this really difficult time. Then we had to look and see what was going on with our patients. So the shelter that we have here in Hyannis is called St. Joseph's House. And to protect the residents of the shelter, they had to limit how many people could come into the shelter. So we actually ended up with a lot of people out on the street. And because a number of programs had closed, they didn't have breakfast, they didn't have dinner, they didn't have a place to wash up. So we created a number of outreach programs. We started to do a shower program. We got a shower trailer, believe it or not, from the government, so that our patients could take showers in the parking lot. And we started to do bag breakfasts, you know, like a bag lunch, but a bag breakfast every morning for people on the street, and partnered with a local restaurant to do dinners. So it's just, what's been so challenging is that it seems like everything, it's always changing, you know? So you're trying to solve problems all day, every day we're solving problems, and then we think we have it fixed, and then we have to change again, you know, so it's really challenging.
It is challenging. It's like all we can really do is take everything day by day, unfortunately. I mean, sometimes even hour by hour. It's like you have a plan for the next morning, and then 10 o'clock hits, you're like, oh, that's not going to work anymore. So taking it day by day. Now, also, we've heard so much about an increase in behavioral health and substance abuse. Have you seen that firsthand as well, or?
So here at Duffy, just to give a little background about what we do, so we are a community health center that specifically serves people who are homeless. So it won't be surprising to you that many of our patients have mental illnesses and have substance use issues. So we provide medical care with our doctors and our nurse practitioners, but we also provide therapy and we provide counseling for people, and we have psychiatrists. So we have a lot of services for our patients that are related to behavioral health. And very clearly our patients are anxious and worried, and increased experience of suicidal ideation, all of those things. So we're definitely seeing the impact of that. And then people with substance use disorders, even if they were in recovery, people have been relapsing, people have been overdosing. So our behavioral health staff have really been working overtime.
I bet. Now, also, You've talked a lot about the homeless population. So what would you say to someone who does not think there is an issue of homelessness on Cape Cod?
So that's very interesting. One of the first lunch meetings that I had when I came to the Cape was with a bank president who said, well, if you didn't have such nice services, people wouldn't be coming from off Cape to come here onto the Cape to be homeless. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe that there are people here who think that everybody who's homeless is from someplace else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so what I have learned to say, first of all, is that the first thing we ask people when we encounter them, in particular people who are in the woods and on the street, is where are you from and where do you want to be, you know?
Okay, yep.
So if somebody is from off Cape, you know, we want to help them to get back home where they were.
Right.
But the truth is we serve 3,000 people every year.
Okay.
And less than 5% of those patients have a zip code that is not from Cape Cod.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have many, many, many people here. As you know, housing costs are high, wages are low, and so it's the perfect storm for homelessness.
Right, right. So switching gears a bit, being a female in a leadership role, do you have a mentor? Did you have a mentor growing up?
So I have throughout my career. It's interesting. I told you that I wanted to be a PE teacher when I was a kid, because all of my favorite teachers were my PE teachers, who were all, of course, women, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that I hadn't really thought too much about before. Early on in my career, when I worked at a major academic medical center in hospital administration, one of the senior vice presidents was a woman, and I really looked up to her and learned a lot from her. She spent time with me. Frankly, I learned what to do and what not to do.
Yep,
So
yep.
sometimes you can see that,
Yeah.
you know, in your mentor. I now, you know, I've been in a CEO leadership position for a long time. And what I have learned is just that there's so many amazing women who work in not-for-profits. And so the people that, the colleagues that I have, that I go to meetings with and we partner on different projects,
Yeah.
I really, there are so many people that I admire, in particular in this community. Yeah.
And do you view yourself as a mentor to other women in your organization as well?
So it just sort of happens that in the not-for-profit sector, and in particular in healthcare, we have a lot of women.
Right.
So,
True.
interestingly, I don't have a particular mentor relationship right now. The women that report to me are all very senior.
Oh, gotcha.
In fact, we're thinking about the future of Duffy Health Center if we're all kind of the same age. You know, we have to be planning for the future. But there's some really outstanding young women around the organization that I make a special effort to give them opportunities to shine, you know, to work on a project, to make a presentation, to really highlight the work that they do for the organization.
Yeah. I think too, now more than ever, it's really great to have that support system. And even if that mentor relationship isn't really, you know, noted, it's like there's definitely those who still look up to, you know, those younger females or even older females that look up to female of any age. So I think that's great. So my last question, Heidi, would be, what advice would you give to a young adult who is interested in pursuing health administration?
Yeah. So one of the things that has happened over the course of my career is that this field has really diversified.
Yeah.
So when I was in graduate school in the 1980s, pretty much you went to a health administration program and you went to work in a hospital. That's what you did. And your career trajectory was to run multiple departments in a hospital and work your way up to be the CEO.
Gotcha.
But over time, that has changed a lot because hospitals have changed so much that they have really slimmed down, cost cutting. There are less sort of management and administrative kind of people
Gotcha.
in hospitals anymore. But there's so much more opportunity out there to work in the community like I do, working for not-for-profit clinics, working in other kind of ambulatory care settings. Two fields that didn't even exist when I was in graduate school are health information technology. This is a huge field, and I really encourage people, and there's definitely a future with electronic medical records, and either on the technical side or on the sales side. So thinking about health IT, and then there's also a lot of work in quality and the quality of services, and learning what we call process improvement and how to make processes work better. So all of those things I think are part of the mix. So really being open-minded, pharmaceutical companies, there's all different ways to approach healthcare management these days. So really trying to read a lot or keep your mind open and looking at what people are doing in healthcare, which is not just being a doctor, not just being a nurse, but and not just being a hospital administrator, but doing a lot of variety of different kinds of careers within health.
It seems as though there's many paths that they can take, so that's great advice. So. Well, Heidi, that wraps up our mini interview. I want to thank you again for taking the time to meet with me. I know the guidance and insight you have given will be a great resource to the students, so thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Yes, have a great rest of your day.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.